Troy Alexander, 005, by Victor Robinson II. Part 1. First mission in 2005. Troy Alexander, a new recruit for MI6 with his qualifications being that he served in the U.S. Marines while living with his father in America under a different name, but was born in Malton, England on April 6, 1982. To his mother Alicia Alexander, a nurse, who was having a fling with an American soldier Jameson Troy, who named their son, which you find out down the line. Jameson would leave with their son to America, and leave Alicia behind, but it was found out that Alicia wasn't a nurse, but a trained assassin for the private sector. In 2001, Troy had joined the Marine Corps, wanted to because of 9/11, and he wanted to fight for his country, and 2 years later his father was dying and told him about his mother. Troy would get on a plane to England to find his mother Alicia. He finds her and she had retired from being an assassin, but she had another family, and when she opened the door she knew he was her son, and she embraced him and introduced him to his brothers and sisters. Alicia was now Alicia Summers, married to a government official named Holland. Troy stays with them for a few months in their villa, and Troy decides to leave them be and make a new life for himself, and that is where he called himself Troy Alexander, to remember his mother and father. Troy joins the British Special Forces, and makes a name for himself using the Marine Corps training to help him move up through the ranks. Now it's present day. Troy Alexander has a fine service record and his language skills speaking French, Chinese, Spanish, Japanese, and Russian, which learned by bedding these types of weapons during OR time. Troy is highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, is a well-trained kickboxer, and it was noted that Troy Alexander is highly dangerous and is a lethal weapon all by himself. He doesn't need a gun. MI6 decides to use Troy for their extreme problems, and they gave him a 00 title. He was dubbed 005. Troy's first mission is to infiltrate the Russian mob, to pull out an undercover agent, who is deep under the named Helena Torskin, whose real name is Helena Watts. She had been placed in the Agron family, the biggest mob family in Novosibirsk. She was sent there to find a Russian terrorist, who is a brother to the head of the Agron family Yurgen, who had been responsible for the recent assassination attempts on Interpol agents and C.I. Who has been trying to take him down for years, and he knows all the agents inside every agency due to torturing and killing agents after getting the information. Troy, being a new hire, will help, and they are going to keep him out of the MI6 database. The title, he was dubbed 005. Troy's first mission is to infiltrate the Russian mob, to pull out an undercover agent, who is deep under the named Helena Torskin, whose real name is Helena Watts. She had been placed in the Agron family, the biggest mob family in Novosibirsk. She was sent there to find a Russian terrorist, who is a brother to the head of the Agron family Yurgen, who had been responsible for the recent assassination attempts on Interpol agents and C.I. Who has been trying to take him down for years, and he knows all the agents inside every agency due to torturing and killing agents after getting the information. Troy, being a new hire, will help, and they are going to keep him out of the MI6 database. The title, he was dubbed 005. Troy's first mission is to infiltrate the Russian mob, to pull out an undercover agent, who is deep under the named Helena Torskin, whose real name is Helena Watts. She had been placed in the Agron family, the biggest mob family in Novosibirsk. She was sent there to find a Russian terrorist, who is a brother to the head of the Agron family Yurgen, who had been responsible for the recent assassination attempts on Interpol agents and CIA, who has been trying to take him down for years, and he knows all the agents inside every agency due to torturing and killing agents after getting the information. Troy, being a new hire, will help, and they are going to keep him out of the MI6 database. A title he was dubbed 005. Troy's first mission is to infiltrate the Russian mob, to pull out an undercover agent, who is deep under the named Helena Torskin, whose real name is Helena Watts. She had been placed in the Agron family, the biggest mob family in Novosibirsk. She was sent there to find a Russian terrorist, who is a brother to the head of the Agron family Yurgen, who had been responsible for the recent assassination attempts on Interpol agents and CIA. Who has been trying to take him down for years, and he knows all the agents inside every agency due to torturing and killing agents after getting the information. Troy, being a new hire, will help, and they are going to keep him out of the MI6 database. The title he was dubbed 005. Troy's first mission is to infiltrate the Russian mob, to pull out an undercover agent, who is deep under the named Helena Torskin, whose real name is Helena Watts. She had been placed in the Agron family, the biggest mob family in Novosibirsk. She was sent there to find a Russian terrorist, who is a brother to the head of the Agron family Yurgen, who had been responsible for the recent assassination attempts on Interpol agents and CIA. Who has been trying to take him down for years, and he knows all the agents inside every agency due to torturing and killing agents after getting the information. Troy, being a new hire, will help, and they are going to keep him out of the MI6 database. Troy arrives in Novosibirsk as a gun for hire. Troy spends a few days getting to know the city, and Troy goes to a nightclub owned by Yurgen's brother Nico, and he sits in the corner and watches the room, and after an hour Helena walks into the club with Nico's men behind her, and they got into Nico's office. Troy starts walking around the club, and he drops a wireless microphone on the office door and listens to the conversation, and Nico is arguing with Helena about Yurgen, who is bringing too much heat on the family with these terrorist attacks, and since they can't find him, it causes problems for the family. Nico is threatening Yurgen through Helena, and Yurgen comes through the back door of the office, and Yurgen speaks in Russian to Nico. "You don't threaten my wife, Nico. Do you understand that everything I have done and doing it for the family? It is necessary. The agencies have had their foot on our neck for our entire lives. Now it is time for us to take action against them. It is time for them to have trouble breathing. It is time for them to know what suffering is all about. They always make Russia the bad guy in their movies. They never ask us why we do the things we do. Because they took everything from us. They take away our way of life. They steal our technology and use it for themselves. They come over and they take our women to feel superior. Now it is time for us to do the taking." Troy calls M at MI6 and tells him that Yurgen has surfaced and Helena is his wife, and M says the mission has changed to capture or eliminate Jürgen. Troy says it will be done. As Troy talking to M. Troy is greeted by two large men who just caught him eavesdropping, and Troy turns around and the two men attempts to attack him, and Troy dodges them and grabs one by the arm and break his arm and kick the man leg and break it with one kick. The other man running at Troy, and Troy spins kick the man through Nico's office door, and Troy sees Jürgen, and their eyes meet, and Jürgen runs out the back door with Helena. Nico's men pull out their automatic weapons, opening fire at Troy, pull out his Glock 17, and shoot all of Nico's men in the head, and then shoot Nico. Troy picks up an automatic weapon, and chases Jürgen and Helena down a secret passageway. Jürgen opens fire on Troy, and Troy is hiding in a hole in a wall, and Troy comes out blasting. Helena tells Jürgen to run, and she holds him off so he can get away. Troy overhears her telling him that. Troy drops the automatic weapon and comes out of the shadows and shoots Helena in the shoulder with his Glock 17, and the bullet travels through her shoulder through the back of Jürgen's head, and he falls to the floor. Troy walks over to Helena and says, "You will live," and she says, "Who the fuck are you?" Troy says, "I am Troy Alexander, 005 Part 2. Dying is easy. It's been 5 years since his first mission, and has been a force to be reckoned with throughout MI6, and he is a rival with fellow MI6 agent 007 James Bond." The Queen's great-granddaughter Miranda Prescott went to spring break in Mexico City with her friends from Cambridge, and Miranda has been kidnapped by a Mexican cartel, and she is to be sold to the sex trade. One of her friends, Kimberly, was able to escape. The Mexican cartel that has taken Miranda is the Marcos cartel, led by Carlos Samuel Marcos and his mother Rosemary, but Carlos's half-big brother was supposed to be the true leader. Bruce Miguel Weston Marcos, who goes by Bruce Weston, is an arms dealer who Troy tried to take down 2 years ago in South Africa due finding out Bruce Weston had sold weapons of mass destruction to the Russians. Troy succeeded in his mission, destroying the weapons, but not bringing down Bruce Weston. Troy has been tasked with going to Mexico City to rescue Miranda Prescott from the Marcos cartel. What Troy doesn't know is Helena Watts has broken out of The Hague, a maximum security black ops prison, with the help of her private army, and she has one goal: to kill Troy Alexander for killing her husband. Troy has made it to Mexico City. Troy goes to the hotel where she was kidnapped, and he is tracing her steps by using the intel from Miranda's friend Kimberly. Troy goes to a nightclub, which is owned by a member of the Marcos cartel, the uncle of Bruce and Carlos, Stefan Demos. Troy sees the nightclub is full of cartel members. Troy goes to the bar and orders a Corona and turns around counting how many cartel members are in the club by counting their cartel tattoos, and then a couple of men bringing through the back door, and girls that look like they have been drugged. Troy doesn't have a gun on him, and he grabs a knife from the bar. Troy tries to make his way to the back of the bar to where Stefan is inspecting the girls. Troy is stopped by a group of cartel members, and before they pulled out the guns, Troy pulls out the knife and quickly slices the guy in front of him's throat and stabs the guy behind in the eye. Troy grabs the dead guy's pistol, and now he is in a gunfight with the cartel. Bullets fly all over the nightclub, and innocent partygoers are getting shot by the cartel while trying to kill Troy. Troy makes 2 Molotov cocktails and toss them at the cartel shooters, lighting them on fire. Troy goes down the hallway and sees Stefan is putting the girls in a van, and Stefan jumps inside the van, and he tells the driver to get the fuck out of here, and they drive away, and Troy steals a Ford 1500 truck and driving and tries to stop the van by trying to knock the van off the road, and more cartel members show up and they are shooting at Troy. Troy finds a shotgun in the truck, and he cocks it, and aims it out the window, and shoots out the tire out of the van, and the van hits an electric pole, and Troy stops the truck, and gets out with the shotgun, and turns around, and Troy stands in the middle of the street unloading the shotgun on the cartel member's car, and Troy turns around and sees the electric pole about to fall on top of the van, and Troy goes to the van to let out the girls, and Miranda is not here. Troy sees Stefan, who is pinned in the van, and Troy pulls out a picture of Miranda and asks her, "Where is this girl?" Stefan says he doesn't know where, and Troy tells him where was he going to take these girls, and Troy tells him that if he doesn't tell him he going to fry to death once that electric transmitter drops on the van. Stefan tells him where he was going to drop the girls off. At a bordello named Casa de Putas in San Mateo, as he said that the electric transmitter falls through the van and fries Stefan to death, and Troy walks away and jumps in the truck and heads for San Mateo. Troy is watching Casa de Putas from a distance, and he sees Miranda in a top window. Troy has informed MI6 that he found Miranda at Casa de Putas in San Mateo. Troy is dressed in a black tux and shows up in Casa de Putas. Troy is greeted by Madame Frida, and she shows him around her bordello, and she introduces him to her girls, and Troy sees Miranda sitting in the middle of the room with tears in her eyes. Madame Frida sees that Troy is interested in Miranda, and she tells him that she is bought and paid for. Madame gets called away, and Troy goes to Miranda, and he tells her that he was sent by the Queen to save her. Troy and Miranda go for the door, and Madame sees Troy and Miranda, and she calls out to stop them. Troy is fighting Madame's men and tells Miranda to run, and Troy defeats Madame's men, and someone calls out Troy's name, and Helena is dressed in a red and black suit, and Helena tells her men to grab Miranda and put her in the car. Troy tells her to let the girl go. Helena says you shouldn't be worried about the girl. She will be fine. She is going to where she belongs with her family, but you should be worried. Helena pulls out a sword and says, "Today the day you die, Troy Alexander." Troy says dying is easy. Helena says, "Clear the room. Just me and him." The room is empty. Helena charges Troy with her sword, and Troy is dodging her attacks, and Troy grabs the blade with his hands and looks into Helena's eyes, and his hands are bleeding. An emotion comes over Troy at this moment as he looks into her eyes while she tries to kill him. Troy knocks her sword out of her hand, and she pulls out her gun, and Troy kicks the gun out of her hand. Helena punches Troy in the face and takes him down the floor and starts pounding away at him. Troy rolls over on top of her and grabs her hands and pins them to the floor, and Troy is looking into her eyes again, and he sees the hatred in her eyes, but he also sees the hurt in her eyes. At that moment Troy has fallen in love with the woman who is content with killing him. They both breathe heavily and Troy kisses Helena, and he stops and sees that Helena is shocked and disgusted at the same time, and he kisses her again, and she kisses him back. The cartel busts in the door and opens fire on Troy, and he slides across the floor and shoots at the cartel, and he looks at a smitten Helena, and Troy shoots his way out the door and jumps in a car and drives off. Troy says to himself, dying is easy, it's living that is hard. Helena picks up her sword with Troy's blood on it and looks at the camera. The end credits song This Is the Day by the Cranberries Part 3. Gun Heavy opening credits, song https://u2. BOV_EOMVEM, 4ZC Troy, is active in a mission going after a terrorist unit called the Hand of Fire, and he jumps on a moving train, and he starts a gunfight with the Hand of Fire, and he shoots them up. Troy sees the leader Malek with the bomb suitcase and the trigger, and Troy is chasing through the train. Malek is knocking passengers in front of Troy and Troy is jumping over the seats. Malek drops the suitcase and jumps out of the train. Troy grabs the suitcase, shoots out a window, and throws the suitcase in a tunnel. Malek is about to press the trigger, and Troy shoots Malek's thumb off. Troy comes charging out of the train and attacks Malek, knocks the trigger out of his hand, and Troy breaks his arm and tosses him to the ground. Malek goes for the trigger, and Troy breaks his leg and grabs the trigger. Troy goes to get the suitcase to handcuff Malek to the suitcase, then Troy throws him on the third rail and fries Malek, and he blows up. Troy gets in the car and calls M and tells him he neutralizes the target. M says, "Well done 005. You can take that vacation you've been wanting." Troy goes to the airport and gets on a plane to Norway. Troy checks in at the Hotel Continental. Troy goes into his room and pays the bellhop and unpacks his clothes, then he undresses and jumps in the shower. Someone comes into the Troy's room and steam is coming out of the bathroom. They got into the bathroom and the room is full of the stream. They opened the shower door and Troy grabs the person and it Helena, and he kisses her and rips off her clothes, and he starts sucking on her breasts and kissing her neck, and her skin is soaking wet, and Helena pushes Troy on his knees, and she puts her pussy on his lips, and he begins to start sucking her clit and fingering her wet pussy, and she is moaning, and she puts her leg on his shoulder. Troy is kissing her thighs and he picks her up and takes her out of the bathroom, then throws her on the bed. Troy jumps on Helena, kisses her lips, song plays. https://u2. BOIWOGF 46FZY. While they are kissing and she rolls on top of him. She starts sucking his nipples. She starts licking his belly and starts sucking his hard cock while looking at him, and she plays his balls, and she tells Troy, "I want to hear you moan my name," and she takes his balls in her mouth, and she gnaws on them a little bit, and Troy moans out Helena. Helena slides her wet naked body over him and slides his hard, wet cock in her pussy, thrusting over and over again, and they are both about to come at the same time. Helena falls on top of Troy. Troy and Helena orders room service. Drinking champagne and eating fresh salmon and codfish with baked potatoes. Helena talks to Troy about him leaving MI6 so they can live life without violence and bloodshed. Troy says he will retire when he goes back and tied up loose ends, and he will leave MI6 to live a quiet life with her. Helena is happy and kisses Troy, and she gets on top of him. In Los Angeles, California, Bruce Weston is having a meeting with a partner of his, Vincent Russo, who is a right hand to a leader of a criminal enterprise called the Winner's Circle, who is in prison, named Victor Stormare, who was betrayed by his best friend and former partner Charlie Carlson. Bruce wants revenge from Troy, killing his uncle Stefan and destroying his family's reputation. Vincent says to Bruce, Victor says he is sorry about his uncle and tells him that he got a plan for his revenge. Vincent says Victor got somebody who paid a large sum of money from intel from MI6, including intel on their agents, and also would help him get pressure to reduce his prison sentence so he can get out and kill Charlie and his fucking cop wife. Bruce says to Vincent, how the fuck is that going to help me get revenge on this motherfucker? Vincent says it's going look like an inside job, and we are going to frame this motherfucker, and he will have no allies, and you get to take him out clean, and I will be heading up this mission to make sure everything goes to plan. And then Bruce, you and your family can get your revenge on Troy Alexander. Bruce says, I can't wait to hear that fucker scream. Bruce and Vincent cheer their whiskey glass. 3 weeks later, Troy returns to work at MI6, and he plans on finishing up paperwork and telling M that he is leaving MI6. CIA agent Bill Stevens is going on a dossier report on Victor Stormare with M006-007. Victor has been in prison in the new Alcatraz since 2007. Victor was involved with the Russian mob and was working with FSB, and was also involved with Yugen Ugrant's terrorist attacks. In 1998, Victor and a few others had taken over a huge crime syndicate in Los Angeles and renamed it the Winner's Circle. It reaches through California to South America, to Canada, to Moscow. Victor is in prison, but is still a threat, and there is a rumor that there is an MI6 agent working with them to expose the agents who are in the field. M looks out his office window and looks at his agents, and he can't wonder who would betray their own people. A white van pulls up in front of MI6, and Vincent comes out of the van and grabs an assault rifle. 12 men get out of the van and put on Halloween masks, cocks their weapons. Helena is sitting in a coffee shop waiting on Troy to go on his lunch break. Troy looks at his phone and Helena texts him, did he retire yet? She texts again, not rushing, smiling face. Vincent walks into the MI6 building and gunfire erupts. Agents are getting gunned down by Vincent and his mercenaries. 001, 004 are gunned down. 006 and 007 are escorting M and Moneypenny out of the building's secret passageway. Vincent and his tech guy Jonas are hacking MI6 servers and are stealing information. Troy goes to the armory and loads up an automatic rifle. Troy goes after the mercenaries. Blood, bullets, bodies are dropping everywhere. One of the mercs knocks the rifle from Troy. Troy headbutts the merc and he pulls a knife, and Troy takes the merc's knife and stabs him in the throat. Troy picks up his rifle and sees 009, 010, 013. He pulls them into an office and gives 009 a pistol. Troy goes back into the fight. 5 men are coming at Troy, and they're raining a hail of bullets at Troy. Troy grabs a bottle of Jack Daniels that is found in 003's drawer, then tears a piece of his shirt, then lights it on fire. Throws it at the 3 men, and lights them on fire. Troy shoots the 2 men, who had split up to come at him. Troy turns around and sees C.I. Bill Stevens bleeding out. Troy takes off his suit jacket and press it on his wound. Vincent and Jonas are done hacking the servers and they run out of the server room. Troy locks eyes with Vincent and starts to shoot at Vincent and Jonas. Troy attacks Jonas and Vincent knocks out Troy. James Bond 007 shows back at MI6 through the passageway after giving M to safely. James Bond sees more mercs and he cocks his pistol, and he is in a gunfight with 4 mercs. Jonas aims his gun at Troy. Vincent knocks the gun off Troy. Jonas says why not kill him, and Vincent says he needs to be disgraced first, and he is not ours to kill. James sees Vincent let Troy live. James kills the 4 mercs. Troy wakes up chained to the table in the conference room. Troy looks up. M is in his face. Troy says what the hell happened? M says you tell me why so many good agents are either dead or wounded and you don't have a scratch on you. Troy says what the fuck are you talking about? M shows him files of him with Helena. M says how long have been seeing Helena? Troy says what I do with my personal time is my business. I am not who caused this shit today. I love fighting for my country. M says when were you ever going to tell us that you had joined the U.S. Marines before you joined the British Army? Also, Troy Alexander isn't your real name, and your mother's name was Alicia Alexander, whose real name was Alicia Alexandra Donovan, a famous Irish assassin, an IRA terrorist. I can't believe how much dirt you have on you, Troy. Troy says I've been working and taking care of business for MI6 for the last 11 fucking years. I have bled for you and my country. How can you say I betray it? James walks into the conference room and says to Troy, "Can you tell us why they didn't kill you? I saw one guy had a gun to your head, and the other guy slap it away. That is suspicious as hell, Troy." I meant what would you think if you were us, Troy? Troy looks at James and M. Troy says do what you got to do. Troy is getting read his rights, and is getting transported to an undisclosed location. The transport is getting hit, and the men are getting wounded and their asses kicked, and the transport truck opens, and it's Helena in a black cat suit, and she gets him out of the van and they escaped. M reviews the CCTV footage, and sees Troy has escaped with Helena, and M tells James to hunt down Troy Alexander. Helena is wondering where to go and Troy says we're going to have to Ireland. Helena, why Ireland? I have to go see my mom. Helena says I am going to meet your mother. Troy says yes. Part 4. Not enough time. Opening credits. Song https://u2. Beubfar 9 YXCPWA. Troy and Helena arrive in South Wexford, Ireland, where Troy's mother Alicia has been hiding ever since her husband Holland divorced her in order to become the new Prime Minister. Troy found out from his half-sister Violet where his mother was located. Alicia owns a hotel resort called Green Village. Troy and Helena are walking into the lobby of the Green Village, and Troy tells Helena, "It's something I forgot to tell you, my real name isn't Troy." Helena says, "If isn't Troy, then what is it?" Before Troy can say it, Alicia shouts out to him and says, "Brian, my son," and she walks up to him and kisses him, and Troy introduces Helena to Alicia as his girlfriend. Hannah says to Troy, "Brian, so Brian, is there anything else you kept from me, sweetie?" Then two kids, a boy and girl, show up and tug on his pant leg and say, "Come play with us." Hannah looks pissed and Troy says, "Oh yeah, I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters, and I am an uncle also, and that's it." Troy is having dinner with Helena, Alicia, Bridget his youngest sister, and her kids Ariel and Ray. Bridget is telling Helena about she finally met Brian as a kid and realizes how welcoming he was to her. "Even though we have different fathers, our love was strong, and it is like that with all our siblings. We were only together as kids for a few months, then later we become closer when he joined MI6, and we were all proud of him." Bridget raises her glass of wine and toast to her brother Brian, and Bridget's husband Glenn shows up and hugs his wife, and Glenn gives Brian a hug and says he missed him last Thanksgiving and that he handled all the cooking himself. Hannah is impressed that Troy O'Brien has another side of him, and Hannah asks Glenn, "Can Brian really cook?" Glenn says, "Cook? That man is a fucking chef in the kitchen." Everyone is laughing. Hannah is looking at Troy O'Brien from across the table at that moment. Hannah sees a future with him, and she can see herself having a family with him. Cosmic Love plays by Florence and the Machine. Hannah daydreams of that future with him and growing old with him in Ireland and raises their children together. Alicia sees how much Hannah loves Troy O'Brien. But Alicia feels something is wrong, and she goes into the kitchen and gets out her mobile and calls Bill Stevens. She calls him Billy on the phone and asks him, "Is there anything going on with Brian?" And he tells her everything that's going on. Hannah and Troy O'Brien are walking in the bright full moon by a gorgeous waterfall. Hannah says, "Oh my God, what a wonderful night, and a beautiful full moon. I am so impressed with you." Hannah looks into his eyes. "If I didn't love you before, I definitely love you now." Hannah kisses Troy O'Brien and rips open his shirt, and she kisses his chest, and she pushes him on a pile of rocks, and she takes off her black dress, takes off her black panties, throws it at him. Hannah's body is glowing in the moonlight. She jumps in the waterfall. Troy O'Brien takes off his clothes and jumps in after her. Troy kisses Helena underwater. They go into a cave beneath the waterfall. Troy is sucking her nipples, squeezing her breasts, and kissing all over her chest, and she watches. The cave ceiling is full of bats. They are watching her and Troy. Troy is sucking on her clit and fingering her pussy, and then he puts his tongue inside her pussy, and she is moaning loud, and she wrapped her legs around Troy's head and her nipples are getting hard. Helena lets out a large orgasmic scream, and she squirts in Troy's face. Her screams scare off the bats in the cave. Troy puts his hard cock inside her wet pussy and it slides right in. Troy sucks on her nipples while he fucking her under the waterfall. Troy kisses her lips and she looks into his eyes, and she says she loves him and he loves her also. Troy wakes up in bed with Hannah sleeping on top of him. Minutes later Troy comes from his room and sees his mother Alicia outside the hotel sitting at a patio table. Troy sits down at the patio table. Alicia says, "Why didn't you tell me you're in trouble?" Troy says, "I didn't want to burden you with my problems." Alicia says, "Your problems are my problem." Troy says, "I made sure I was followed here. I was very careful." Alicia says, "I am not worried about trouble. This town, this country is filled with your cousins the Donovans, Maguires, and Gallaghers. You fuck with one, we all fight, that's our family way. Even your brothers and sisters, who are named Morgan, know where they come from. You are safe here. You can live here for how long you want with Hannah." Troy is looking at Hannah is playing with his niece and nephew while listening to his mother. Alicia says, "Troy Alexander is just a name. Brian is who you are and who your family knows, and that's all that matters." Alicia grabs Troy's face and says, "You don't have to prove anything to those people who don't believe what a good man you are." Troy says, "It's not about me. It is about the good agents that die and someone has to fight for them, and the blame is on Troy Alexander, and yes, it is just a name, but it is me also. I created a reputation with that name, and I know I could stay here and live a wonderful life with you and Hannah, but I won't live life on the run, and if they can't find me, they will come after all of you, and I can't let anyone die because of me." Alicia says, "I see you already made your mind up." Troy says, "I love you, Mom," and Alicia says, "And I love you, Brian," and she kisses him and gives him a location on a piece of paper. Alicia says, "I knew what you were going to do anyway, because I have done what you about to do. That's why I had your father take you away to America while I take care of business. That man you going to meet is an old friend of mine and your father, and he is someone you can trust." And she kisses him and walks away and passes Hannah, and Hannah looks into Alicia's eyes and says, "He is going back, isn't he?" Alicia says, "Yes. This is his decision, and I have made a decision like this long ago, but I fear that it might not end well this time." She sucks back her tears and runs her grandchildren into the hotel for breakfast. Troy is packing his bag and Hannah walks into the room. Troy tells her that she needs to stay here until he is done with his clearing his name. He will be back in her loving arms, and as he walking out the door, she pulls a gun on him and says, "You are not going anywhere without me, and if you try I will shoot you." Troy says, "I don't have enough time for this. I got to do this to protect my family and you. I want you to stay here, and if anything happens to me, at least you will be safe from harm." Hannah gets in Troy's face, "I can either stay here until you leave, then follow you, or we can go together now. No matter what, we are in this together. Either way, it goes, and if you decided that you want to stay, then we can stay together and live happily ever after in this beautiful country." Troy says, "When we end this, then we return here and stay forever." Hannah kisses Troy and says, "Let's go get these motherfuckers." 2 hours later, Troy and Hannah show up at a restaurant in Paris called Le Bon Georges, and they are meeting with Bill Stevens and laying out the entire conspiracy against him, which was put together by Victor Stormare and his right-hand Vincent Russo, which he heard from a CIA informant inside the winner's circle. Jonas, the man who stole files from MI6, is Vincent's little brother. Vincent and Jonas used to be a part of CIA, a black ops unit called Shadow Company back in the late 90s, and your boy Bruce was the major supplier for weapons back then. He was given the weapon company guns and ammo in 1996 by a Dr. Cameron Ford, who he and his wife Dr. Rachel Ford disappeared without a trace in 2000. Troy asks where Jonas and Vincent are now. Bill says Jonas is sitting on the files in an apartment complex in Winchester, England, while his brother Vincent is somewhere in the area trying to wait on Victor's buyer for the intel from MI6. Troy says, I get Jonas, then I get Vincent, and then finally I take out Bruce Weston once and for all. Bill warns that Jonas has a small army with him, and Troy says that won't be enough. Hannah asks Bill does he have any weapons, and Bill goes to his car and gives Troy and Hannah some weapons and 2 bulletproof vests. Troy says, I need to borrow the car. Bill says it is yours anyway. Troy and Hannah get in the car, and Bill tells Troy one more thing: James was tasked with bringing you in or green light to take you out. Troy says thanks. MI6 knows that Troy is back in England, and M tells 007 that Alexander is back, and he needs to be dealt with. If you can't bring him in, then you have the license to kill whatever it takes. 007 says hopefully he surrenders. Troy and Hannah sneak into the apartment complex, and they are taking out the guards at the door with their knives. They quickly find out the complex is full of mercenaries, and Troy pulls out his automatic weapon and opens fire at them. Blood, bodies, and bullets are dropping throughout the hallways. Jonas is concerned with the gunfire, and he calls Vincent and tells him the complex is under siege. He checks the cameras and it's Troy fucking Alexander, he says to Vincent. Vincent is en route to the complex, after just negotiating a price with Victor's buyer. Vincent says, hold on brother, the cavalry is coming. James hears on the radio from Q about the gunfire at the Stockholm apartment complex, and he heads there. And he gets out of the car and loads up, and Q tells him that got some information from CIA agent Bill Stevens that Jonas and Vincent Russo are responsible for the raid on MI6, and James goes inside and didn't hear the rest of the message. Troy might be innocent, after all, says Q. Troy and Hannah are shooting their way up the stairs. Jonas is going up the fire escape to the roof. Hannah is fighting hand-to-hand combat with a female merc, and she tells Troy to go to get Jonas. I have this bitch, go. Troy goes after Jonas to the roof. James is walking over bodies, and he sees Troy chasing a man out the window, and James follows him. Hannah pulls out her knife and stabs the woman in the neck. Troy attacks Jonas, and Jonas drops the USB card with the files on it, and it also proves that Troy is not corrupt, but it proves who is. Jonas pulls out his pistol, and Troy kicks the pistol out of his hand, grabs him by the hand and clotheslines him, and he flips to the roof, and Troy picks up the pistol. Troy aims the pistol to his head, and James comes out and aims his pistol at Troy, telling him to put his gun down. Jonas smiles, says, "You are having a bad day, Troy?" Vincent shows up with the helicopter and opens fire with an M16. Hannah comes to the roof and sees the USB card, and she grabs at it the same time Jonas tries to. James is shooting at the helicopter. Troy grabs Jonas and slams him to the wall and throws him off the roof. James goes to shoot Troy and Hannah jumps in front of the bullet. James is shocked and Vincent opens fire crazy on the rooftop, and due to her being shot by James in shock from the hit, Vincent guns her down in front of Troy and James opens fire on Vincent and wounded him and he flies away. MI6 agents show up at the complex. Troy is holding onto Hannah, who is full of bullets, and she tells him she loves him and she dies in his arms. James looks on from a distance and he has tears in eyes. Bill Stevens shows up with MI6 agents and Troy is holding Hannah's body on the roof and he realizes she has a USB card in her hand. Em apologizes to Troy for the situation and for what happened to Helena, and Troy is full of rage and trash Em's office and walks out of the office and sees James talking to Moneypenny, and James sees Troy and Troy looks at James and James says, "I was just following orders. The bullet wasn't meant for her." Troy runs up on James, starts attacking him. The only thing Troy can think of is Helena. Troy throws James through a glass window. Troy takes the piece of glass and tries to cut James's throat, and James kicks the glass out of his hand. James starts bashing away at Troy's face and Troy falls to the floor and James sees Troy's bloody face and Troy says, "Do it, James, do it, 007. Em comes in the middle, gets the agents to escort Troy out of the building. Em says, "You are blacklisted from MI6 as of this moment." Troy spits blood in Em's face. Bill Stevens is waiting on him in the car and is shocked to see him with blood on his face. Troy gets in the car and drives off. Bill asks Troy, "What now?" Troy wants to take out Vincent Russo. Bill says Vincent is off the grid, but if you want Vincent, I know the way you can get in his crosshairs. Troy says, "I kill his brother, is that enough?" Bill says no, he takes orders from Victor, and Victor's main revenge is to get ready to take out his old partner Charlie Carlson and his wife Angelina, and Bill shows him files. Charlie used to be a cop, then somehow he became a part of the winner's circle and became friends with Victor, then years later betrayed him to his wife Angelina. Victor has plans to get out of prison earlier than expected. Troy says how to get close to Charlie then. Bill says Charlie has a protective agency to witnesses or victims from killers or some shit like that. His last team was brutally murdered, he looking to rebuild his team, and I can find a way to get your name on that list, but I know you need some time to grieve. Troy says, "I grieve when Vincent is dead." Troy Alexander will be back. End credits. Song https://u2. BZR4WNGSLWIA